Hi, I'm Erika, and 3 weeks ago, at my parents' anniversary dinner, my brother Marcus stood up in front of our entire extended family and declared me a complete failure who would never amount to anything. What he didn't know was that I had been his boss for the past 8 months, secretly owning the company where he worked and took credit for deals I had been orchestrating from behind the scenes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The evening started like every other Chen family gathering at my parents' house in Riverside Heights. Mom had spent days preparing her famous honey-glazed ham and Dad's specialty garlic mashed potatoes, while the dining room sparkled with the good china that only came out for special occasions. It was their 35th wedding anniversary, and the entire extended family had gathered to celebrate what everyone considered the perfect marriage that had produced 2 children with vastly different trajectories in life. I arrived early to help with the final preparations, something I had always done since I was old enough to fold napkins properly. The familiar scent of vanilla candles and fresh flowers filled the house, mixed with the savory aromas drifting from the kitchen. Mom greeted me with her usual warm hug, but I caught something different in her expression. A tightness around her eyes that suggested she was more anxious about tonight than she was letting on. "Erika, sweetheart, you look beautiful," she said, adjusting my navy blue dress that I had chosen specifically because it was understated and professional without being flashy. I had learned long ago that drawing too much attention to my success at family gatherings only led to uncomfortable questions and thinly veiled resentments. Marcus and Jessica should be here any minute. He's been working such long hours lately at Sterling Industries. The mention of Sterling Industries sent a familiar flutter through my stomach. For the past 8 months, I had been living a carefully constructed double life, one that would be impossible to maintain much longer. While my family believed I ran a small consulting firm from my downtown apartment, the reality was far more complex and infinitely more powerful than they could imagine. I had founded Summit Ventures 3 years ago with the inheritance from my grandmother, a woman who had believed in my potential when no one else in the family seemed to notice I existed. What had started as a modest investment firm had grown into a significant player in the commercial real estate and corporate acquisition space. My specialty was identifying undervalued companies with strong fundamentals but poor management, acquiring controlling interests, and implementing strategic changes that transform struggling businesses into profitable enterprises. Sterling Industries had been one of those acquisitions. The mid-sized commercial development company had been hemorrhaging money due to cost overruns, missed deadlines, and a series of questionable decisions by their executive team. When the opportunity arose to purchase a controlling stake through a complex series of shell companies and silent partnerships, I had moved quickly and quietly. The existing management remained in place, unaware that their new majority shareholder was a 28-year-old woman they had never met. What made the situation particularly delicious was that Marcus worked there as a senior project manager, completely oblivious to the fact that his little sister, the one he routinely dismissed as directionless and unmotivated, was effectively his boss. Through carefully placed allies and strategic information sharing, I had been guiding company decisions from the shadows, implementing changes that had already begun to turn Sterling Industries around financially. The doorbell chimed, interrupting my thoughts, and I heard Marcus's booming voice echoing through the foyer. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. He had always been loud, commanding attention wherever he went, a trait that had served him well in sales but made family gatherings feel like performances where he was perpetually center stage. Jessica's higher-pitched laughter followed, the sound carrying that particular quality of someone who laughed a little too hard at everything her husband said. "There's my successful son," Dad announced as Marcus strode into the living room, his arms spread wide in a gesture that encompassed the entire room. At 32, Marcus maintained the athletic build he had cultivated in college, his dark hair perfectly styled, and his expensive suit tailored to emphasize his broad shoulders. He had always been the golden child, the one whose achievements were celebrated with elaborate parties and proud announcements, while my accomplishments were met with polite acknowledgement and quickly forgotten. Marcus embraced our parents with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the family hierarchy. Jessica appeared beside him, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo that perfectly complemented her emerald green dress. She had always been gracious to me, but in the way that someone might be kind to a family pet, pleasant but without any real interest or investment in my well-being. "Erika," Marcus said, turning to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Still running that little consulting thing from your apartment? Mom mentioned you've been busy with some project or another." The dismissive tone was subtle enough that our parents wouldn't catch it, but clear enough that I understood exactly what he thought of my professional life. "Something like that," I replied evenly, accepting the brief hug he offered. "How are things at Sterling Industries? I heard there have been some significant changes in the company structure recently." I couldn't resist the small probe, curious to see if he had any awareness of the shifts happening around him. His face lit up with the self-satisfied expression he wore whenever discussing his career. "Actually, things have been going incredibly well. The company's been making some really smart moves lately, and I've been instrumental in several major deals. Just last month, we secured the Grandview Commercial Complex project, which is going to be huge for the company. My direct involvement in landing that contract has definitely put me on the radar for a promotion." I nodded appropriately, hiding my amusement at his version of events. The Grandview project had indeed been a significant win for Sterling Industries, but Marcus's role had been limited to presenting proposals that I had helped craft through strategic guidance provided to the actual decision-makers. The client had been impressed not by Marcus's sales pitch, but by the comprehensive financial analysis and innovative development approach that I had orchestrated from behind the scenes. As we moved into the dining room, I found myself seated across from Marcus and Jessica, with my parents at the head and foot of the table. The extended family filled the remaining chairs. Aunts and uncles and cousins who had watched Marcus and me grow up with very different expectations for our futures. Uncle Tom, Dad's brother, had already launched into a story about his latest golf triumph, while Aunt Sarah was showing photos of her daughter's recent promotion at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. The conversation flowed around typical family topics: updates on careers and relationships, gentle gossip about neighbors and mutual friends. I participated when appropriate, sharing carefully edited details about my consulting work that were technically true but revealed nothing about the scope or success of Summit Ventures. It was a delicate balance I had perfected over the past few years, staying connected to my family while protecting the parts of my life they weren't ready to understand or accept. "Erika's always been so modest about her work," Mom said during a lull in the conversation, her tone affectionate but slightly worried. "I wish she would share more about what she's working on. Sometimes, I think she doesn't want to burden us with the details, because things might not be going as well as she hoped." The comment stung, not because it was intentionally cruel, but because it revealed how little my own mother understood about my capabilities or ambitions. In her mind, my reluctance to discuss my professional life could only mean that I was struggling, not that I might be protecting them from the complexity of a success they weren't prepared to comprehend. Marcus seized the opening with the timing of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "You know, Mom, I've been thinking about that too. Erika's been doing this consulting thing for 3 years now? And she's still working out of her apartment, still single, still doesn't seem to have any real direction or concrete achievements to show for all that time and effort." The room grew quiet, the casual chatter fading as everyone sensed a shift in the conversational tone. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, not from embarrassment but from anger at the calculated nature of his attack. This wasn't casual sibling teasing, it was a deliberate attempt to diminish me in front of our entire extended family. "Marcus," Jessica said softly, placing a warning hand on his arm, but he was already committed to his path. "No, Jess, I think this needs to be said," he continued, his voice gaining volume and authority. "We're all adults here, and we all care about Erika. But sometimes caring means being honest about what we see, even when it's uncomfortable." I remained silent, my hands folded in my lap, waiting to see how far he would push this. Part of me was curious about what he thought he knew about my life, while another part was calculating how much damage he was about to do to relationships that I might not be able to repair. "The truth is," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly as if he were delivering difficult but necessary news, Erika has never really found her place in the world. She's smart, we all know that, but intelligence without direction or ambition doesn't lead anywhere meaningful. She's 28 years old, still living alone, still playing around with this vague consulting business that doesn't seem to generate enough income for her to even rent proper office space. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly torn between his desire to defend me and his reluctance to contradict his successful son in front of the entire family. Mom's face had gone pale, her eyes darting between Marcus and me as if she were watching a tennis match where she couldn't predict the outcome. "Marcus, that's enough," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "Is it though?" he pressed, encouraged by what he interpreted as weakness rather than restraint. When is someone going to tell Erika the truth about her life? When is someone going to explain that good intentions and vague ambitions aren't enough in the real world? He stood up, the motion drawing every eye in the room to him as he assumed the commanding presence that had always come so naturally to him. "Look at where we are at the same age, Erika. I have a beautiful wife, a house in Riverside Heights, a senior position at a respected company, and a clear trajectory toward executive leadership. I'm building something real, something substantial." The room was absolutely silent now, even the children at the smaller table having stopped their chatter to stare at the unfolding drama. I could feel the weight of everyone's attention, the mixture of discomfort and morbid curiosity that comes when a family dinner transforms into something much more serious and potentially damaging. "You, on the other hand," Marcus continued, his tone taking on the patronizing quality he might use with a disappointing employee, "are still figuring out what you want to be when you grow up. Still living in that tiny apartment, still working on projects that no one understands because you can't explain them clearly enough for anyone to see their value. Still making excuses for why you haven't achieved anything concrete or measurable." Jessica tugged at his sleeve more insistently now, but he ignored her, fully committed to what he clearly saw as a necessary intervention disguised as tough love. "The honest truth, Erika, is that you're a complete failure. Not because you're not smart or capable, but because you've never learned how to channel those abilities into real-world success. You've never learned how to commit to something difficult and see it through to completion. You've never developed the discipline or the professional relationships or the business acumen that lead to actual achievement." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion, visible and toxic and impossible to take back. I looked around the table, cataloging the expressions on my family members' faces. Horror from Mom, resignation from Dad, embarrassment from Jessica, and uncomfortable silence from everyone else. They were waiting for my response, expecting either tears or a defensive outburst that would confirm Marcus's assessment of my emotional instability. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter or sarcastic smile, but a genuine expression of amusement that seemed to surprise everyone, including myself. The irony of the situation was so profound, so perfectly constructed by circumstances beyond Marcus's understanding, that I found myself genuinely entertained by the cosmic joke that was about to unfold. "That's an interesting perspective, Marcus," I said, my voice calm and measured. "Tell me, how exactly do you measure success? Is it annual income? Net worth? The scope of one's professional responsibilities? The number of people whose livelihoods depend on your business decisions?" He looked puzzled by my lack of defensive anger, clearly expecting a different reaction to his public humiliation attempt. "Well, yes, those are certainly relevant factors. Success is measurable, Erika. It's not some abstract concept that means different things to different people. In the business world, which is where adults operate, success is about results." "Results," I repeated thoughtfully. "Like the results Sterling Industries has achieved over the past 8 months? The company where you work, where you claim to be instrumental in major deals and positioned for promotion?" Something flickered across his face, a moment of uncertainty that suggested he wasn't entirely sure where I was going with this line of questioning. "Sterling has been performing exceptionally well, yes. The leadership team has implemented some innovative strategies that have really turned things around financially." "The leadership team," I mused. "Tell me, Marcus, do you know who owns Sterling Industries? I mean the actual ownership structure, not just the management team you interact with on a daily basis. The confusion in his expression deepened, and I could see Jessica looking back and forth between us with growing alarm. She was more perceptive than her husband, and had apparently sensed that this conversation was heading somewhere dangerous for their carefully constructed narrative of success and superiority. "I don't see how that's relevant," Marcus said, but there was less confidence in his voice now. "The important thing is that the company is doing well, and I'm a key contributor to that success." "Humor me," I said gently, "just for the sake of family curiosity. Do you know who makes the major strategic decisions at Sterling Industries? Who decides which projects to pursue, which clients to target, which innovative approaches to implement?" The room had gone silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. Where before it had been the uncomfortable quiet of people witnessing family conflict, now it carried a sense of anticipation, as if everyone could feel that something significant was about to be revealed. "The executive team makes those decisions," Marcus said slowly, clearly trying to figure out why I was asking these questions and where they might be leading. "The CEO, the board of directors, the senior leadership. And do you know who controls the board of directors, Marcus? Who has the authority to hire and fire executives, to approve or reject major expenditures, to determine the overall direction of the company?" "The shareholders," he answered automatically, but his face had gone pale as understanding began to dawn. "The majority shareholders have that authority." I reached into my purse and withdrew my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. "I think there's someone you should meet, Marcus. Someone who might be able to clarify the ownership structure of Sterling Industries for our family." Before anyone could ask what I was doing, I pressed the call button and put the phone on speaker mode. The room filled with the sound of ringing, once, twice, 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Summit Ventures, this is David Chen speaking." "David, it's Erika. I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday evening, but I'm at a family dinner, and we're having a discussion about Sterling Industries. Could you please explain to my family who owns controlling interest in that company?" There was a brief pause, during which I could practically hear David's confusion about why I was making this request in this particular setting. But he was professional enough to answer the question straightforwardly. "Certainly, Ms. Chen. Summit Ventures holds a 57% controlling stake in Sterling Industries, acquired through a series of strategic investments over the past 8 months. As the founder and CEO of Summit Ventures, you are effectively the majority owner and ultimate decision-maker for Sterling Industries' strategic direction." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's face had gone from pale to ashen, his mouth slightly open as he processed what he had just heard. Jessica had gripped the edge of the table so tightly, her knuckles were white. My parents stared at me as if I had suddenly transformed into someone they had never seen before. "Thank you, David," I said calmly. "I'll speak with you tomorrow about the quarterly reports." "Of course, Ms. Chen. Have a pleasant evening." I ended the call and placed my phone carefully on the table next to my water glass. This simple action seemed to break whatever spell had held the room frozen, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Cousin Sarah asking if she had heard correctly, Uncle Tom demanding to know what this meant, Mom whispering, "Oh my God," repeatedly under her breath. But I only had eyes for Marcus, who was staring at me with an expression of complete and utter shock. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was completely speechless, his carefully constructed worldview crumbling around him as he tried to process the implications of what he had just learned. "So," I said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather, rather than the complete reversal of everything he thought he knew about our relative positions in the world, "let's talk about success, Marcus. Let's talk about results and achievements, and professional accomplishments. Let's talk about who's really been instrumental in Sterling Industries' recent performance improvements. The golden child, the family success story, the brother who had just publicly declared me a complete failure, could only stare at me in stunned silence as the full magnitude of his mistake began to sink in. And this was only the beginning. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 seconds. Marcus opened his mouth twice, closed it, then finally managed to croak out a single word. "Impossible." I leaned back in my chair, watching him struggle to reconcile the confident narrative he had been spinning about his professional success with the jarring reality that his despised little sister had been pulling the strings all along. The color was slowly returning to his face, but it was the angry red of someone whose pride had been publicly shattered rather than the healthy flush of embarrassment. David wouldn't lie about something like this, I said matter-of-factly. Summit Ventures is a publicly registered investment firm. The ownership records for Sterling Industries are filed with the state and accessible to anyone who knows where to look. Which, frankly, you should have if you were as instrumental in the company's success as you claim to be. Dad finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a whisper. Erika, sweetheart, what exactly is Summit Ventures? How long have you owned this company? I turned to face him, noting how old he suddenly looked, as if the revelation had aged him a decade in the span of a phone call. Summit Ventures is a commercial real estate and corporate acquisition firm that I founded 3 years ago with Grandma Elena's inheritance. We specialize in identifying underperforming companies with strong fundamentals and implementing strategic improvements that restore profitability. 3 years? Mom repeated faintly. You've been running a major investment firm for 3 years and you never told us? The hurt in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt a pang of guilt that I quickly suppressed. I tried to tell you, Mom. Every family gathering, every phone call. I mentioned my consulting work, my business projects. But every time I started to explain the scope of what I was doing, the conversation got redirected to Marcus's latest achievement, or someone else's more easily understood career milestone. Marcus had been listening to this exchange with growing agitation, his hands clenched into fists on the table. This is ridiculous, he burst out. Even if you do own some stake in Sterling, that doesn't mean you have anything to do with the actual operations. Ownership and management are completely different things. I smiled at him, the expression probably looking more predatory than I intended. You're absolutely right, Marcus. Ownership and management are different. Let me tell you about the management side. I pulled my phone back out and opened my email app, scrolling until I found the message thread I was looking for. Here's an interesting email from 3 weeks ago. It's from Sterling's CEO, James Morrison, asking for guidance on whether to pursue the Riverside Shopping Center renovation project. Apparently the profit margins were tight and the timeline was aggressive, and he wanted strategic input from the majority stakeholder before committing company resources. Marcus's face had gone pale again. The Riverside project? But that was my recommendation. I brought that deal to the company. You brought the initial proposal? Yes, I agreed. But the financial analysis that convinced Morrison to move forward, the risk assessment that identified potential cost savings, the timeline modifications that made the project viable, those came from Summit Ventures, specifically from me. I scrolled to another email. Or here's one from last month, where Morrison is asking about the personnel changes in the sales department. Apparently there were concerns about Tom Bradley's performance and whether to replace him as sales director. Tom's my direct supervisor, Marcus said weakly. I'm aware. I recommended keeping him, but providing additional support and training rather than replacement. A decision that has worked out well, since sales numbers have improved significantly over the past 6 weeks. The rest of the family was watching this exchange like spectators at a tennis match, their heads turning back and forth between Marcus and me as each revelation landed with devastating precision. Jessica had stopped trying to intervene and was simply staring at her hands, apparently realizing that her husband's professional foundation was crumbling beneath him. How? Marcus finally asked, his voice barely audible. How is this possible? How have you been doing this without anyone knowing? I set my phone down and really looked at him for the first time that evening, seeing not the arrogant older brother who had dominated family gatherings for as long as I could remember, but a confused man whose entire sense of self had just been demolished by information he couldn't process or deny. The same way most major investment decisions are made, Marcus, through shell companies, silent partnerships, and strategic intermediaries. When Sterling Industries was hemorrhaging money 18 months ago due to cost overruns and poor project management, several investment firms approached them about potential buyouts or partnership arrangements. I paused to take a sip of water, letting the words sink in. Summit Ventures made the most attractive offer through a series of nested companies that obscured the ultimate source of the investment. The existing management team remained in place, but with new oversight structures and strategic guidance that gradually transformed the company's operations. But why? Mom asked, her voice small and confused. Why would you do all this in secret? Why wouldn't you tell us you were successful? The question cut deeper than I expected, forcing me to confront motivations I hadn't fully examined even to myself. Because every time I tried to share anything meaningful about my work, I was dismissed. Every time I mentioned a business achievement, the conversation immediately shifted to Marcus's latest promotion, or deal, or professional milestone. I looked around the table, meeting each family member's eyes in turn. Because I learned that in this family, success is only celebrated when it comes from the expected source. When Marcus talks about landing a major contract, everyone listens and congratulates him. When I mentioned closing a significant investment deal last Christmas, Dad asked if I was sure I understood the risks, and Mom suggested I might want to focus on finding a nice young man to settle down with instead. The accuracy of my observation was written across their faces, the uncomfortable recognition that they had indeed treated my professional life as a cute hobby rather than a serious career. Dad opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again without speaking. So I stopped trying, I continued. I let you think what you wanted to think, and I built my business in private. Summit Ventures has acquired interests in 12 companies over the past 3 years. Our portfolio is worth approximately $47 million. Sterling Industries represents about 30% of our holdings. The numbers landed in the dining room like physical objects, tangible and undeniable. Uncle Tom whistled low under his breath. Cousin Sarah whispered, "Holy shit," and immediately looked mortified at her language in front of the children. Mom simply stared at me as if I had announced I was from another planet. But it was Marcus's reaction that interested me most. The initial shock was giving way to something else now. Something that looked like anger, mixed with desperation. Even if all of this is true, he said, his voice gaining strength as he found his footing in familiar territory of challenging my credibility, it doesn't change the fundamental point I was making. You're still living alone in a tiny apartment. You're still hiding your life from your family. You're still avoiding the normal milestones that most people achieve by their late 20s. I had been waiting for this. The inevitable attempt to reframe the conversation around my personal life rather than my professional achievements. It was a classic Marcus move, pivoting to different criteria for success when the original argument became untenable. You're right, I said, surprising him with my agreement. I am still living alone. In a 3,000-square-foot penthouse apartment in Metro District that I purchased outright 2 years ago. No mortgage, no debt. Complete financial independence. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a business card holder, extracting one card and sliding it across the table to him. Summit Ventures isn't run out of my apartment, Marcus. We lease the entire 42nd floor of the Metropolitan Tower downtown. 18 employees, including a full legal department and a team of forensic accountants who specialize in identifying the kind of financial irregularities that nearly destroyed Sterling Industries before our intervention. Marcus picked up the business card with shaking hands, staring at the embossed gold lettering that read Erika Chen, founder and CEO, Summit Ventures, along with an address that was definitely not my apartment building. As for avoiding normal milestones, I continued, conversationally, I've been rather busy building a multi-million-dollar business empire. But you're right that I haven't prioritized traditional relationship goals. It's difficult to find time for dating when you're restructuring failing companies and managing complex acquisition negotiations. Jessica finally looked up from her hands, her voice tentative when she spoke. Erika, I don't understand. If you've been this successful, why let everyone think otherwise? Why not correct us when Marcus talks about your consulting work as if it's a small side business? It was a fair question, and one that deserved an honest answer. Because I wanted to see how far it would go. I wanted to understand exactly what my family thought of me when they believed I had nothing to offer except good intentions and unrealized potential. I gestured toward Marcus, who was still staring at my business card as if it might change back into something else if he looked at it long enough. Tonight, I got my answer. When Marcus stood up and declared me a complete failure in front of our entire extended family, he revealed exactly how he's always seen me. Not as someone whose achievements might be different from his own, but as someone fundamentally incapable of achievement at all. "Erika," Dad said slowly, "we never meant to make you feel that way. We've always been proud of you." "Have you, Dad? When was the last time you asked about my work with genuine interest rather than polite obligation? When was the last time any of you celebrated one of my professional accomplishments with the same enthusiasm you show for Marcus's quarterly sales reports?" The questions hung in the air unanswered because we all knew the truth. My family had never taken my career seriously because it didn't fit their understanding of what success looked like for a young woman. They had expected me to find a husband, settle down, maybe work part-time in something pleasant and non-threatening like teaching or nonprofit administration. "But that still doesn't explain why you bought Sterling Industries specifically," Marcus said, his voice gaining an edge of suspicion. "Out of all the companies you could have acquired, why my company?" I had been dreading this question because the honest answer would reveal just how calculated my actions had been. Because Sterling Industries perfectly fit our acquisition criteria: solid fundamentals, strong market position, poor management leading to underperformance. The fact that you worked there was initially coincidental. "Initially," he repeated, latching onto the qualifier. "But not entirely?" I sighed, recognizing that the moment for complete honesty had arrived whether I was ready for it or not. "After I discovered you worked there, yes, it influenced my decision to move forward with the acquisition. I was curious about your professional performance when you weren't protected by family connections or personal relationships." "And?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Your work is adequate, Marcus. Solidly mediocre. You're competent at following established procedures and presenting ideas that other people develop. But you lack the analytical skills or innovative thinking that drive real business growth. The promotion you've been expecting? It's not going to happen, because the executive team recognizes that your contributions are limited to implementation rather than strategy." The words were brutal, but they were also truthful in a way that our family had never been with each other. We had spent years dancing around honest assessments, protecting feelings at the expense of clarity, enabling mediocrity by refusing to acknowledge it directly. Marcus's face went through several color changes as he processed this evaluation. "You're saying I'm not good at my job?" "I'm saying you're exactly as good at your job as most middle management employees are. Reliable, competent within defined parameters, but not exceptional, not leadership material, not someone who drives innovation or creates value beyond executing other people's visions." I paused, softening my tone slightly because I could see how much this was costing him. "There's nothing wrong with being a solid middle manager, Marcus. Most companies depend on people who can reliably execute established processes. But that's not the same thing as being instrumental in major deals or being positioned for executive advancement." "So the Grandview project," he said quietly. "My role in landing that contract?" "You presented the proposal that Summit Ventures designed. You followed the talking points that our team developed. You answered questions using the market analysis that our research department provided. The client was impressed by the comprehensive approach and innovative financing structure, but those elements came from my team, not from your individual contributions." The revelation seemed to deflate him physically, his shoulders sagging as the full scope of his professional irrelevance became clear. For years he had built his identity around being the successful sibling, the family member, with the impressive career and clear trajectory toward greater achievements. Learning that his success was largely illusory, that he had been a supporting player in someone else's business strategy, fundamentally challenged everything he believed about himself. "I need some air," he said abruptly, pushing back from the table and walking toward the back door that led to my parents' patio. Jessica hesitated for a moment, then followed him, leaving me alone with the rest of the family. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet that had greeted my earlier revelations. This was the contemplative silence of people trying to process information that challenged their fundamental assumptions about someone they thought they knew completely. "Erika," Mom said finally, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We've been unfair to you and we've been blind to your achievements." I shook my head. "I don't need apologies, Mom. I need understanding. I need my family to see me as I actually am, rather than as who you think I should be." But why didn't you trust us with the truth? Dad asked. Why did you feel like you had to hide your success from us? The question forced me to confront the deeper pain that had driven my secrecy, the fundamental belief that my family would never truly value my achievements, because they didn't align with their expectations for my life. Because I was afraid that even knowing about my professional success wouldn't change how you see me, that you would still find ways to diminish it, or explain it away, or suggest that it wasn't enough, because I haven't also achieved the personal milestones you value more. That's not fair, Mom protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Marcus just spent 10 minutes explaining to our entire extended family that I'm a failure because I'm single and working from home. Even after learning that I own a multi-million-dollar company, his immediate response was to question why I haven't prioritized finding a husband and settling down. The accuracy of this observation was impossible to deny, and I could see the uncomfortable recognition spreading across their faces. They were beginning to understand that their treatment of me hadn't been neutral or supportive, but actively dismissive of achievements that didn't fit their narrow definition of appropriate success for their daughter. Uncle Tom, who had been unusually quiet throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke up. Erika, I think we've all learned something important tonight. About assumptions, about family dynamics, about success taking different forms than we might expect. His words were diplomatic but genuine, and I appreciated the effort he was making to bridge the gap that had opened between different generations and perspectives around the table. I hope so, Uncle Tom. I hope we can move forward with a better understanding of who we all actually are, rather than who we think we should be. Through the patio doors, I could see Marcus and Jessica in intense conversation, his hands gesturing emphatically while she listened with an expression that suggested she was trying to process revelations that extended far beyond this evening's surprises. Their marriage had been built partly on the foundation of his professional success and clear trajectory toward greater achievements. Learning that this foundation was largely illusory would require significant adjustment for both of them. What happens now? Dad asked. With Sterling Industries, with Marcus's job, with all of this? It was a practical question that deserved a practical answer. Nothing dramatic changes immediately. Marcus is a competent employee who performs his assigned duties adequately. There's no reason to disrupt his position unless his performance declines or he creates problems for the company. I paused, considering how much detail to share about my longer-term plans. Sterling Industries will continue the restructuring process that has already begun. More efficient operations, better project management, strategic expansion into higher-margin markets. The company is positioned for sustained growth over the next 5 years. And Marcus's expectations for promotion? Mom asked quietly. Will need to be adjusted to align with realistic assessment of his capabilities and contributions. There are advancement opportunities within his current track, but executive leadership requires skills that he hasn't demonstrated. It was a diplomatic way of saying that Marcus would need to abandon his dreams of dramatic professional advancement, but it was also honest about the opportunities that remained available to him if he could accept a more modest assessment of his potential. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the patio door sliding open as Marcus and Jessica returned to the dining room. Marcus's face was composed but subdued, while Jessica looked like she had been crying. They took their seats without speaking, and I waited to see if Marcus had processed enough of tonight's revelations to engage in constructive conversation. I've been thinking about what you said, he began slowly, about my performance, about my role in the company's success. I don't like it, but I can't argue with the evidence. It was more self-awareness than I had expected from him, and I felt a flicker of hope that we might be able to rebuild our relationship on a more honest foundation. Marcus, recognizing reality isn't the same as accepting failure. Understanding your actual strengths and limitations is the first step toward building on what you do well. What I do well, he repeated with a bitter laugh. Apparently that's not much. That's not true, I said firmly. You're reliable, you work well with clients, you're good at presenting complex information in accessible ways. Those are valuable skills that contribute to business success. They're just not the same skills that drive strategic innovation or executive decision-making. Jessica reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Maybe this is an opportunity to think about what you really want from your career, rather than what you think you should want. Her comment surprised me with its insight and emotional intelligence. Perhaps she understood better than any of us that Marcus had been performing a version of success rather than pursuing goals that genuinely motivated him. "I don't know how to do that," Marcus admitted. "I've spent so long thinking I was on track for bigger things that I never considered whether those bigger things were actually what I wanted." It was an opening for a different kind of conversation, one that moved beyond professional hierarchies and competitive dynamics towards something more collaborative and supportive. "What aspects of your work do you actually enjoy, Marcus? When do you feel most engaged and energized?" He thought for a moment, his expression softening as he considered the question seriously. "I like working with the clients directly, the problem-solving conversations, helping them think through their needs and concerns. I'm good at translating technical requirements into practical solutions they can understand. Client relations and project coordination," I said thoughtfully. "Those are specialized skills that Sterling Industries needs to maintain and develop. There are advancement opportunities in that direction that might be more aligned with your natural strengths." "You mean I could still have a successful career, just not the career I thought I was building?" "I mean, you could have a fulfilling career that builds on what you actually do well rather than trying to force yourself into roles that require different skill sets." It was a revelation that seemed to surprise him, the idea that success might be redefined around his actual capabilities rather than his assumed potential. For the first time that evening, his expression showed something other than shock or anger or defensive denial. "Would you?" he hesitated, then started again. "Would you be willing to help me figure out what that might look like? I mean, if you're really the majority owner of Sterling Industries, and if you actually want to help, rather than just prove a point about my limitations?" The question revealed more vulnerability than Marcus had shown in years, maybe ever. He was asking not just for professional guidance, but for something approaching sisterly support in rebuilding his understanding of his own potential. "I'd be willing to have that conversation," I said carefully, "but it would require both of us to be completely honest about our perspectives and motivations. No more performances. No more competition for family approval. No more pretending that our relationship dynamics haven't been problematic for both of us." "I can try," he said. "I mean, I want to try. Tonight has been humbling in ways I didn't think were possible." Mom had been listening to this exchange with tears streaming down her face, though she was trying to hide her emotional response behind her napkin. "I'm so proud of both of you," she said shakily. "This conversation, this honesty, this willingness to move forward together. It's what I've always hoped for, but never knew how to encourage." Dad nodded, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your grandmother would have been so proud of what you've built, Erika, and she would have been proud of how you're handling this situation with your brother." The mention of Grandma Elena brought a fresh wave of emotion, reminding me that my ability to build Summit Ventures had started with her belief in my potential and her practical support through the inheritance that provided initial capital. She had seen something in me that the rest of the family had missed, and I felt her presence in this moment of tentative reconciliation. "Thank you," I said simply, "both for the support and for being willing to see me differently than you have in the past." The rest of the evening passed quietly, with family members gradually processing the revelations and beginning to ask more thoughtful questions about my business and my plans for the future. The dramatic confrontation had given way to something more subdued but also more genuine, conversations that felt authentic in ways our family interactions hadn't for years. As the gathering wound down and people began to leave, Marcus approached me near the front door. "Erika, I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for tonight, but for years of not seeing you clearly. For dismissing your achievements and for making assumptions about your capabilities that were unfair and untrue. I appreciate that, Marcus. And I'm sorry for the deception, for letting you believe things about my life that weren't accurate. We both contributed to the misunderstandings between us. Can we start over?" he asked. Not as the older brother who thinks he needs to give career advice to his struggling sister, but as two adults who might actually be able to help each other build something better. I considered the question, weighing the hurt and frustration of years of dismissive treatment against the potential for building a genuine relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. "I'd like to try," I said finally. "But it will require both of us to change patterns that have been developing for decades." "I understand. And Erika? Thank you for not firing me." "I know. You would have been justified in making changes at Sterling Industries that didn't include me." "Marcus, you're not going to lose your job because we're family. You're going to keep your job because you're competent at what you do. That's how business actually works when personal relationships don't interfere with professional decisions." As I drove home through the quiet streets of Riverside Heights, I reflected on the evening's unexpected developments. The confrontation had unfolded differently than I had anticipated, leading not just to the revelation of my secret success, but to the possibility of genuine change in my family relationships. The penthouse apartment that Marcus had mocked was indeed my sanctuary, 3,000 square feet of carefully designed space that reflected my personal style and professional achievements. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city skyline, while the home office contained multiple monitors displaying real-time data from my various investments and business operations. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like the space represented not just financial success, but the possibility of personal integration. The walls I had built between my professional achievements and my family relationships were beginning to come down, creating opportunities for more authentic connections with people who mattered to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my best friend and the one person who had known the full truth about Summit Ventures from the beginning. "How did it go? Do I need to come over with emergency chocolate and wine?" I smiled as I typed back, "Better than expected. Rain check on the emergency supplies, but definitely want to tell you everything tomorrow. Can't wait for details. Proud of you either way." Her support had been unwavering throughout the months of maintaining my double life, and I looked forward to finally being able to integrate all aspects of my identity without the exhausting effort of keeping secrets from people I cared about. As I prepared for bed in my actual bedroom rather than the tiny apartment bedroom my family had imagined, I felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of deception and resentment had been lifted from my shoulders. The road ahead would require careful navigation, particularly in rebuilding trust with Marcus and establishing new patterns of family interaction. But for the first time in years, I felt genuinely optimistic about the possibility of having both professional fulfillment and authentic personal relationships. The complete failure that Marcus had declared me to be had transformed into something neither of us had expected, the foundation for building something better than what we had before. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency I had always appreciated about the beginning of a new work week. I was reviewing quarterly reports from my various portfolio companies when Kelly, my assistant, buzzed the intercom with unusual urgency in her voice. "Ms. Chen, there's a James Morrison from Sterling Industries on line 2. He says it's urgent and relates to personnel matters that require your immediate attention." I glanced at the clock, 8:47 in the morning, which meant Morrison had been thinking about whatever crisis had prompted this call since well before normal business hours. "Put him through, Kelly." The line connected with the slight crackle that indicated Morrison was calling from his car rather than his office. "Ms. Chen, I'm sorry to call so early, but we have a situation developing that I thought you should know about immediately." "What kind of situation, James?" "It's regarding Marcus Chen in our project management division. He arrived at the office about an hour ago and has been making some very unusual statements to other employees about his relationship to company ownership. HR called me at home because they weren't sure how to handle it." I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes as I processed this information. I had hoped that Marcus would need a few days to digest Sunday's revelations before taking any action, but apparently he had decided to process his new understanding of our professional relationship in a more public forum than I would have preferred. "What specifically has he been saying, James?" "According to HR, he's been telling people that his sister owns the company and that he's been working directly with the ownership group on strategic initiatives. Some employees are confused, others are skeptical, and there's general uncertainty about whether his claims are legitimate or whether he's having some kind of personal crisis." The situation was delicate for multiple reasons. Morrison was unaware of my family relationship to Marcus, which meant he didn't understand the personal dynamics that had led to this moment. From his perspective, a mid-level employee was making grandiose claims about family connections to ownership that seemed designed to enhance his professional standing within the company. James, I need you to schedule a meeting for 10 o'clock this morning. Include Marcus, yourself, and Patricia Williams from our legal team. Conference room B on the executive floor. I'll handle this situation directly. Should I ask HR to prepare any documentation regarding his statements or potential disciplinary measures? No disciplinary measures. This is a communication issue that needs clarification, not a personnel problem that requires punishment. Just make sure the meeting is private and that no other employees are informed about the discussion. After ending the call, I sat quietly for several minutes, contemplating the complexity of managing family relationships within a professional context. I had anticipated that integrating my personal and business lives would create challenges, but I hadn't fully considered how Marcus might struggle to navigate his new understanding of our relative positions within Sterling Industries. My phone rang again, this time displaying Marcus's personal cell number. I debated whether to answer, ultimately deciding that direct communication might prevent further workplace complications. Marcus, I assume you're calling about your conversations with Sterling employees this morning. Erika, I'm sorry. I know I probably shouldn't have said anything, but people were asking about the company's recent performance improvements, and I thought they should know that there's been strategic guidance from ownership that has contributed to our success. His voice carried a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, as if he was thrilled by his newfound connection to company leadership, but unsure about how to appropriately express that relationship to colleagues who had previously seen him as a peer, rather than someone with access to executive decision-making. Marcus, we need to talk about this situation in person, with appropriate legal and management oversight. I've scheduled a meeting for 10 o'clock at Sterling Industries. Can you be available? Of course. But Erika, I want you to know that I wasn't trying to create problems. I was actually trying to give credit where credit is due, to acknowledge that the company's improvements have come from thoughtful leadership rather than just market conditions. I understand your intentions, and we'll discuss the most appropriate ways to handle these communications going forward. For now, please don't have any additional conversations with other employees about ownership or strategic matters until after our meeting. Okay. And Erika? Thank you for not just firing me over the phone. I know this situation is complicated. Marcus, I told you yesterday that your employment status isn't affected by our family relationship. That remains true. We just need to establish clear boundaries and communication protocols that serve everyone's interests. After ending the call, I spent the next hour reviewing Marcus's personnel file and recent performance evaluations, preparing for a conversation that would need to balance family considerations with legitimate business requirements. Patricia Williams, my head legal counsel, arrived at 9:30 to discuss the potential complications that could arise from having a family member as an employee in a company where I maintained controlling interest. The primary concern, Patricia explained as we reviewed relevant employment law, is ensuring that his treatment doesn't create preferential or discriminatory patterns that could expose the company to legal challenges from other employees. His performance evaluations need to be based on objective criteria, his advancement opportunities need to align with his demonstrated capabilities, and any family relationship needs to be disclosed appropriately to relevant management. What about his statements to other employees about company ownership? Are there confidentiality or insider trading implications we need to address? Potentially. If he's sharing information about strategic decisions or ownership structure that isn't publicly available, that could create issues. We need to clarify what information he has access to and establish protocols for maintaining appropriate confidentiality going forward. The drive to Sterling Industries took 25 minutes through downtown traffic, giving me time to mentally prepare for a conversation that would establish new parameters for both my professional relationship with Marcus and his role within the company. The Metropolitan Tower, where Summit Ventures was headquartered, offered a view of the Sterling Industries building 8 blocks away, a perspective that had amused me over the past months as I managed the company's strategic direction from a distance. Sterling Industries occupied floors 12 through 18 of a modern office complex that reflected the solid but unspectacular success the company had achieved over its 20-year history. The lobby was tastefully appointed with granite floors and contemporary furniture, professional but not luxurious, suggesting a company that prioritized substance over appearance. I arrived at the executive floor to find Morrison waiting near the elevator, his expression suggesting he had spent the morning trying to understand a situation that made no sense within his normal frame of reference. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming in person to handle this. I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure how to interpret the claims Marcus has been making. We'll clarify everything in the meeting, James. Is he already here?" "Yes, he's been waiting in conference room B for about 10 minutes. He seems nervous, but not defensive, if that helps you gauge his mindset." Patricia had arrived separately and was waiting outside the conference room with a folder of documents that I assumed contained legal protocols and disclosure requirements. "Everything ready?" I asked her quietly. "Yes. I've prepared templates for confidentiality agreements and conflict of interest disclosures that should address the immediate legal requirements. We can adapt them based on how you want to structure his ongoing role and access to sensitive information." I took a deep breath and opened the conference room door. Marcus was seated at the far end of the polished table, wearing a navy suit that I recognized as one of his favorites, the one he typically reserved for important meetings or presentations. His hair was perfectly styled, and he had clearly put extra effort into his appearance, as if he were preparing for a job interview rather than a family conversation. "Good morning, Marcus," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table while Morrison and Patricia arranged themselves on either side. "I think it's time we had a formal discussion about the situation that has developed. I want to start by apologizing again," Marcus began immediately. "I realize I should have asked you how to handle this before saying anything to my colleagues. I was excited about understanding my connection to the company's success, but I didn't think through the implications of sharing that information inappropriately." Morrison looked confused by the reference to Marcus's connection to company success, clearly still uncertain about whether the claims had any basis in reality. "Ms. Chen, I'm hoping you can help me understand exactly what relationship exists between Marcus and Summit Ventures, or the ownership structure of Sterling Industries. I had anticipated this moment for months, knowing that eventually I would need to disclose my family relationship to key company executives. James, Marcus is my older brother. He has worked for Sterling Industries for approximately 2 years, during which time I have maintained strict separation between our family relationship and any business decisions affecting the company." The revelation hit Morrison with obvious surprise, his eyes widening as he processed the implications. "Your brother." So when he told employees that his sister owns the company, he was being literal rather than metaphorical. "Correct. Marcus learned about my ownership stake in Sterling Industries yesterday evening during a family gathering. Prior to that conversation, he was unaware of my involvement with the company, and I had no direct communication with him about his work or performance. But some of the things he's been saying," Morrison continued, "about working with ownership on strategic initiatives, about having input on company decisions. Was that accurate?" I glanced at Marcus, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable as the scope of his overstatements became apparent. Marcus has not been working directly with ownership on strategic initiatives. His role in the company has been exactly what his job description indicates: project management within the parameters established by his supervisors. Marcus's face flushed with embarrassment. "I think I may have overstated my involvement when I was talking to people this morning. I was trying to explain that some of the strategic improvements at Sterling came from ownership guidance, but I made it sound like I was personally involved in those decisions." "Which you weren't," I clarified gently but firmly. "Your work performance has been evaluated based on your individual contributions within your assigned role. The strategic guidance provided to company leadership came through normal business channels and didn't involve your input or participation." Morrison was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation, the challenge of managing family relationships within a professional context where clear boundaries needed to be maintained. "So what exactly does this mean for Marcus's position going forward? Are there conflicts of interest we need to address?" Patricia opened her folder and withdrew several documents. "There are several steps we need to take to ensure appropriate legal compliance. First, we need formal disclosure of the family relationship to HR and relevant management. Second, we need confidentiality agreements regarding any information Marcus may have access to about ownership or strategic decisions. Third, we need protocols for ensuring his performance evaluations and advancement opportunities remain based on objective professional criteria. I'm willing to sign whatever documents are necessary, Marcus said quickly. I don't want my relationship to Erika to create problems for the company or questions about my professional standing. The documents are important, I agreed. But more important is establishing clear communication boundaries going forward. Marcus, you cannot discuss ownership structure, strategic decisions, or confidential business information with other employees, regardless of your family relationship to the majority shareholder. I understand. I realize I created confusion this morning that could have been avoided if I had thought more carefully about what information was appropriate to share. Morrison had been taking notes throughout the conversation, apparently trying to develop an action plan for managing the workplace implications. What should I tell other employees who heard Marcus's statements this morning? There's already speculation and questions about company ownership and family connections. It was a practical concern that required careful handling. We'll prepare a brief statement acknowledging that there was miscommunication about family relationships and company structure, without providing detailed information that isn't relevant to daily operations. The focus should be on clarifying that all employees are evaluated based on their individual performance and contributions. And Marcus's role specifically? Are there any changes to his responsibilities or reporting structure that need to be implemented? I had given considerable thought to this question over the past day, recognizing that Marcus's position within the company would require careful management to avoid both the appearance of favoritism and the reality of family complications affecting business decisions. Marcus will continue in his current role with his current responsibilities. His performance will be evaluated using the same criteria applied to all project management staff. His advancement opportunities will be based on his demonstrated capabilities and the company's operational needs, not on family relationships. But, I continued, there will be additional restrictions on his access to confidential information and strategic planning discussions. He will not participate in executive meetings, ownership-related communications, or strategic planning sessions that involve sensitive business information. Marcus nodded his understanding, though I could see disappointment in his expression. He had probably hoped that acknowledging our family relationship might enhance his professional opportunities, rather than creating additional restrictions on his access to company information. Patricia distributed the confidentiality agreements and conflict of interest disclosures, explaining the legal requirements and potential consequences for violations. The documents were comprehensive, covering everything from insider trading restrictions to protocols for reporting ethical concerns that might arise from family relationships within the company structure. One additional matter, I said as Marcus reviewed the legal documents. I need to address the statements you made to colleagues this morning about your role in company decisions and strategic initiatives. That information was inaccurate and could create misconceptions about your professional standing that might affect your working relationships with other employees. You're right. I should clarify what I actually said and correct any misimpressions I created. Morrison looked up from his own notes. What would be the most appropriate way to handle that clarification? Should it come from Marcus directly, from HR, or from management? I think Marcus should address it directly with the people he spoke to this morning, I decided. A simple acknowledgement that he misspoke about his involvement in strategic decisions, along with clarification that his role remains focused on project management responsibilities. I can do that, Marcus agreed. I'll speak with each person individually and make sure they understand that I overstated my connection to company decision-making. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes as we worked through practical details of managing family relationships within the professional environment. Patricia reviewed the legal requirements for ongoing compliance, Morrison developed protocols for handling similar situations in the future, and Marcus signed the necessary disclosure and confidentiality documents. As the formal discussion concluded, Morrison excused himself to return to his executive responsibilities, leaving me alone with Marcus and Patricia for a few minutes of more personal conversation. Marcus, I want you to understand that these restrictions aren't punitive, I said once Morrison had left the room. They're necessary for protecting both your professional integrity and the company's legal compliance. I understand, and I want you to know that I don't expect special treatment, because we're family. I want to earn any advancement opportunities based on my own work and capabilities. That's exactly the right approach. And Marcus, the conversation we had yesterday about identifying career paths that align with your actual strengths rather than your assumptions about advancement, that offer remains open. But it needs to happen outside the office, as family members rather than as employer and employee. Patricia gathered her documents and prepared to leave, but paused to offer some additional perspective. For what it's worth, situations like this are more common than people realize. Family members working in companies with complex ownership structures need to navigate these boundaries carefully, but it's entirely manageable with appropriate protocols and clear communication. After Patricia left, I remained in the conference room with Marcus for a few minutes of private conversation. He looked exhausted, as if the stress of navigating this new reality was beginning to take its toll on his energy and confidence. "Are you okay?" I asked, softening my tone now that we were speaking as siblings rather than as business associates. This has been a lot to process in less than 48 hours. "I'm overwhelmed," he admitted. "Yesterday I thought I understood my place in the world, my career trajectory, my professional identity. Now I'm trying to figure out how to rebuild all of that within a completely different framework." "That's normal, Marcus. Major revelations about family relationships and professional circumstances require time to process and integrate. You don't have to figure everything out immediately. Can I ask you something? And I want an honest answer, not a diplomatic one." "Of course. Do you think I have the potential to build a successful career at Sterling Industries? Not because we're family, but based on my actual capabilities and the company's operational needs?" The question deserved the honest assessment he was requesting, even if the answer might be difficult for him to hear. "I think you have the potential to build a fulfilling career that makes meaningful contributions to company success. Whether that translates to the kind of advancement you've been expecting depends on how you define success and how willing you are to focus on developing your actual strengths rather than trying to compensate for limitations." "You mean the client relations and project coordination skills you mentioned yesterday? Those are real strengths, Marcus. Most companies struggle to find employees who can manage complex client relationships effectively while maintaining attention to operational details. If you can develop those capabilities more deliberately, there are advancement opportunities that would utilize your natural talents, but not executive leadership, not the trajectory I've been working toward." "Probably not. Executive leadership requires strategic thinking and decision-making capabilities that are different from the skills you demonstrate most naturally. That doesn't mean your career can't be successful and rewarding, just that it might follow a different path than you originally envisioned." He absorbed this assessment quietly, apparently weighing the implications for his professional planning and personal identity. "I think I need to have a serious conversation with Jessica about adjusting our expectations and goals. We've been making financial decisions based on assumptions about my earning potential that may not be realistic." "That's probably wise. But Marcus, adjusting expectations doesn't mean abandoning ambitions. It means aligning your efforts with opportunities that actually match your capabilities and interests. Will you help me figure out what that might look like? I mean, outside of work, as family members having career conversations rather than as employer and employee. Yes, I'm willing to help with that. But it will require both of us to be completely honest about your strengths and limitations, and about opportunities that might be available within or outside Sterling Industries." As I prepared to leave the conference room, Marcus asked one final question. "Erika, do you think our family relationships can recover from all of this? From the years of misunderstanding and the revelations about your success and my limitations?" It was a question that went to the heart of everything we had been navigating since Sunday evening, the possibility of rebuilding family connections on a foundation of honesty rather than assumptions and performances. "I think our relationships can become more authentic and supportive than they've been in years," I said carefully. "But it will require all of us to let go of old patterns and expectations, to see each other as we actually are rather than as who we think we should be. I want that. I want to be your brother rather than your competitor for family approval or professional recognition." "Then we'll work on building that kind of relationship. But Marcus, it's going to take time and patience, and probably some difficult conversations as we figure out how to interact differently than we have in the past." The drive back to my office gave me time to process the morning's developments and plan for the additional complexities that would undoubtedly arise as my family adjusted to new information about my professional life and their own assumptions about success and achievement. Kelly greeted me with a stack of messages and a concerned expression. How did the meeting go? You look like it was emotionally draining. Complex but productive. Family business mixed with actual business creates complications that require careful navigation. Mr. Morrison called about 20 minutes ago. He wanted to confirm that the situation has been resolved and whether there are any additional protocols that need to be implemented company-wide. Please call him back and let him know that immediate concerns have been addressed through confidentiality agreements and disclosure requirements. If similar situations arise in the future, he should contact Patricia Williams for guidance on legal compliance. The afternoon passed quietly, as I returned to the normal rhythms of managing Summit Ventures and monitoring the performance of my various portfolio companies. Sterling Industries represented only one component of my business interests, but the family complications associated with that particular investment would clearly require ongoing attention and careful management. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah around 4 o'clock. Coffee tomorrow? I'm dying to hear how everything unfolded after Sunday's big reveal. I typed back quickly. Definitely. Fair warning that it's gotten more complicated since then. Aren't family situations always more complicated than they initially appear? That's what makes them interesting. Her observation was accurate, and I appreciated her perspective on family dynamics as someone who had watched my relationship with Marcus from the outside for several years. Sarah had often pointed out patterns in our interactions that I was too close to recognize, particularly Marcus's tendency to dismiss my achievements and my own tendency to avoid direct confrontation about his behavior. The rest of the week passed with relative calm, as the immediate crisis at Sterling Industries stabilized, and Marcus apparently took to heart the guidance about managing his communications with colleagues. Morrison reported that the workplace speculation about ownership and family connections had died down quickly once Marcus clarified his earlier statements. But the deeper work of rebuilding family relationships and helping Marcus navigate his adjusted understanding of his professional capabilities would require sustained effort over months rather than days. The Sunday dinner confrontation had been a catalyst for change, but the actual transformation would happen through countless smaller conversations and decisions, as we all learned to interact more authentically with each other. Friday evening found me in my penthouse apartment, reviewing financial reports and strategic plans for the following week, when my mother called with an unexpected request. Erika, your father and I have been talking about everything that happened on Sunday, and we were wondering if you might be willing to have dinner with us next weekend. Just the three of us, so we can have a more private conversation about our family relationships and how we might do better going forward. The invitation represented exactly the kind of opportunity I had hoped might emerge from Sunday's revelations, a chance to rebuild connections with my parents based on mutual understanding rather than their assumptions about my life and priorities. I'd like that, Mom. Would Saturday evening work? I could come to the house, or we could meet somewhere neutral if you'd prefer. The house would be wonderful. And Erika? We've been doing some soul-searching about how we've treated your career and your achievements over the years. We want to apologize and to understand better how we can be more supportive going forward. I appreciate that, Mom. I'm looking forward to having that conversation. As I ended the call, I reflected on the unexpected trajectory that had emerged from Marcus's attempt to humiliate me at the anniversary dinner. What had begun as a painful confrontation about family dynamics and professional success had opened possibilities for more honest relationships and mutual support that I hadn't anticipated. The complete failure that Marcus had declared me to be had indeed been transformed, but not into the vindictive triumph I might have imagined. Instead, it was becoming something more valuable and sustainable, the foundation for building authentic connections with people who mattered to me, based on reality rather than performance or competition. The systematic dismantling I had begun wasn't destruction for its own sake, but the careful removal of barriers that had prevented genuine understanding and mutual respect. And that work, I was beginning to realize, would be far more rewarding than any business achievement I had accomplished independently. 3 months after the anniversary dinner that had upended everything, I was reviewing the quarterly performance reports for all my portfolio companies when Kelly knocked on my office door with an expression that suggested something significant was about to happen. Ms. Chen, there's a gentleman here who says he represents the Hartwell Corporation. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting that you'll want to hear what he has to say about Sterling Industries. The Hartwell Corporation was a major commercial development firm that had been circling several of my smaller holdings like a predator waiting for signs of weakness. Their interest in Sterling Industries specifically was concerning, particularly since Sterling had been performing exceptionally well under the new management protocols I had implemented. Send him in, Kelly, and please ask David to join us. If Hartwell is making overtures about Sterling, I want our CFO present for the conversation. The man who entered my office was exactly what I had expected from a Hartwell representative. Expensive suit, confident bearing, and the slightly aggressive smile of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted through a combination of charm and intimidation. He introduced himself as Richard Blackwood, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions, and settled into the chair across from my desk as if he owned the place. Ms. Chen, I'll get straight to the point. Hartwell Corporation has been monitoring Sterling Industries' performance over the past year, and we're impressed by the turnaround that's been achieved under new ownership. We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition that would be extremely lucrative for Summit Ventures. David arrived and took his seat just as Blackwood was launching into his prepared presentation. The offer was substantial, nearly double what I had invested in Sterling Industries, with terms that would allow me to retain minority ownership while transferring operational control to Hartwell's management team. It's a generous offer, I acknowledged when he finished his pitch, but I'm curious about your timing. Sterling Industries wasn't on the market when you developed this proposal, which suggests you've been planning this approach for some time. Blackwood's smile faltered slightly, the first indication that this conversation might not proceed as smoothly as he had anticipated. We've been tracking several companies in the commercial development sector, looking for opportunities that align with our expansion strategy. Sterling Industries represents exactly the kind of solid fundamentals and growth potential we value. And you believe that Hartwell's management would be superior to the current operational structure? With all due respect to the improvements you've implemented, Ms. Chen, Hartwell Corporation has resources and market connections that could accelerate Sterling's growth beyond what's possible as an independent entity. David had been reviewing the acquisition documents while we talked, his expression growing increasingly skeptical. Richard, these projections assume that Sterling's current management team would be replaced entirely. What's the justification for that level of operational disruption? Standard practice for acquisitions of this type. Hartwell has proven management systems and executive talent that have delivered consistent results across our portfolio. Maintaining existing personnel creates unnecessary complications and limits our ability to optimize performance. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Blackwood outlining Hartwell's vision for Sterling Industries and the benefits of integration into their larger corporate structure. His presentation was professional and persuasive, but something about his approach felt calculated in a way that extended beyond normal business negotiations. I appreciate the thoroughness of your proposal, I said finally. Summit Ventures will need time to review the terms and consider the strategic implications. Can you give us 2 weeks to conduct our own analysis? Of course, though I should mention that we're also exploring other opportunities in this market segment, so timing may become a factor if our discussions extend too long. After Blackwood left, David and I spent an hour dissecting his proposal and trying to understand what had motivated Hartwell's sudden interest in Sterling Industries. The timing seemed suspicious, particularly given that Sterling's improved performance had only become apparent in recent months. There's something he's not telling us, David observed. Companies like Hartwell don't make unsolicited acquisition offers without inside information or strategic pressure we're not seeing. My thoughts exactly. Can you do some research on Hartwell's recent activities? I want to understand what they know about Sterling that we might not be aware of. That afternoon, I decided to visit Sterling Industries personally to discuss the acquisition offer with Morrison and to get his perspective on potential threats or opportunities that might not be visible from my position as external owner. The conversation would also give me a chance to check on Marcus, who had been navigating his adjusted role within the company with what appeared to be genuine effort and improved self-awareness. Morrison's response to the Hartwell proposal was immediate and alarmed. They've been circling us for months, Ms. Chen, making inquiries about our client contracts, our financial position, our management stability. I assumed they were just conducting general market research, but an acquisition offer explains a lot about their behavior. Have they approached any of our employees directly? Attempted to recruit key personnel or gather inside information? Not that I'm aware of, but I'll check with HR and department heads to see if anyone has been contacted. If they're serious about acquisition, they might be trying to destabilize our operations to improve their negotiating position. The possibility of corporate espionage or deliberate sabotage added a new dimension to the situation that would require careful investigation and strategic response. James, I want you to implement enhanced security protocols immediately. All confidential documents should be restricted to essential personnel, and any unusual inquiries from external parties should be reported directly to you or to Patricia Williams. Understood. And Ms. Chen? I hope you're not seriously considering their offer. Sterling Industries has been performing better than it has in years, and our employee morale is at an all-time high. Selling to Hartwell would undo all the progress we've made. I'm not planning to sell, James, but I need to understand what's driving their interest and whether there are vulnerabilities in our operations that we need to address. As I was leaving Morrison's office, I encountered Marcus in the hallway outside the project management department. He looked more relaxed than he had in months, his demeanor suggesting that he had found his footing in his redefined role within the company. Erika, what brings you to the office today? Everything okay? Business matters that required in-person discussion. How are things going with your project teams? Really well, actually. I've been focusing on the client relationship aspects of project management, and it turns out I'm better at that than I realized. We've had several clients specifically request that I remain their primary contact for future projects. That's excellent news, Marcus. Sounds like you've found your professional sweet spot. I think I have. And Erika, I wanted to thank you for the career conversation we had last month. Understanding my actual strengths instead of trying to force myself into leadership roles I'm not suited for has made work much more enjoyable and productive. Our family dinner the previous weekend had been a turning point in multiple relationships. My parents had indeed apologized for years of dismissive treatment, and we had begun developing more authentic ways of communicating about our respective lives and achievements. Marcus and Jessica had also made significant adjustments to their financial planning and career expectations, decisions that had apparently reduced stress and improved their marriage. I'm glad it's working out. And Marcus, there's something you should know. Hartwell Corporation has made an acquisition offer for Sterling Industries. I'm not planning to accept it, but their interest in the company might create some workplace uncertainty over the next few weeks. His face immediately showed concern. Are you worried about hostile takeover attempts or corporate sabotage? I'm concerned about their motivations and their knowledge of our operations. If anyone approaches you or your colleagues with unusual questions about company performance or internal operations, I need you to report it immediately. Of course. And Erika? Thank you for telling me directly, instead of letting me hear rumors or speculation from other employees. I appreciate being treated as a trusted family member rather than just another company employee who might be kept in the dark about strategic threats. The distinction he was making reflected the improved boundaries we had established between our family relationship and our professional interactions. Marcus understood that he wouldn't be involved in strategic decision-making about the company, but he also knew that I would keep him informed about developments that might affect his work environment or job security. That evening, David called with preliminary findings from his research into Hartwell Corporation's recent activities. Erika, I think we may have a bigger problem than just an unwanted acquisition offer. Hartwell has been acquiring companies throughout the commercial development sector, apparently building towards some kind of market consolidation strategy. How many acquisitions are we talking about? 7 companies in the past 18 months, including 2 that were direct competitors of Sterling Industries. They're systematically buying up mid-sized firms with strong client relationships and established market positions, which suggests that Sterling Industries represents a strategic target rather than just an opportunistic investment. Exactly. And there's more. I found records of Hartwell representatives attending industry conferences where Sterling Industries was presenting, including the Regional Development Summit, where Marcus gave a presentation about the Grandview project. The mention of Marcus's presentation triggered a memory that sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. He had been proud of that speaking opportunity, had mentioned it during several family conversations as evidence of his growing recognition within the industry. But if Hartwell representatives had been in the audience, they might have gained insights into Sterling's capabilities and client relationships that could inform their acquisition strategy. David, I need you to pull together everything we can find about Hartwell's acquisition patterns, their management practices post-acquisition, and their financial backing. If they're building toward market consolidation, we need to understand their ultimate strategy and our options for responding. I'll have a comprehensive analysis ready by tomorrow afternoon. But Erika, if they're as aggressive as their track record suggests, simply refusing their offer might not be enough to protect Sterling Industries. The implications of his warning were sobering. If Hartwell Corporation was determined to acquire Sterling Industries as part of a larger market consolidation strategy, they might escalate their efforts beyond polite acquisition offers to more aggressive tactics designed to force a sale or destabilize company operations. Friday morning brought an unexpected development that confirmed my growing concerns about Hartwell's intentions. Kelly buzzed my intercom with obvious agitation in her voice. "Ms. Chen, James Morrison is on line 1, and he sounds extremely upset. He says there's been a development at Sterling Industries that requires your immediate attention." I picked up the call to find Morrison speaking rapidly, his usual professional composure replaced by barely controlled anger. "Ms. Chen, we have a serious problem. 3 of our senior project managers received job offers from Hartwell Corporation this morning, offers that included detailed knowledge of their current salaries, benefits packages, and specific project responsibilities." How detailed are we talking about, James? Detailed enough to suggest that someone with access to our personnel files and project databases has been sharing information with Hartwell. The offers were tailored specifically to each individual's career goals and compensation expectations in ways that wouldn't be possible without inside knowledge. Have any of the employees accepted the offers? Not yet, but 2 of them have asked for meetings to discuss counteroffers from Sterling. They're concerned about job security and advancement opportunities if Hartwell continues to pursue acquisition. The situation was escalating beyond a simple acquisition offer into active corporate espionage and employee poaching, tactics that suggested Hartwell was prepared to use aggressive methods to achieve their strategic objectives. "James, I'm calling an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Include Patricia Williams, our head of security, and the 3 employees who received offers. We need to address this situation before it destabilizes our entire workforce." "What about Marcus? Should he be included in the meeting?" I considered the question carefully, weighing the benefits of his insights against the need to maintain appropriate boundaries between family relationships and sensitive business discussions. Not in the formal meeting, but I'd like to speak with him separately. If Hartwell is targeting our employees based on inside information, he might have observed something unusual that could help us identify the source. The drive to Sterling Industries that afternoon felt different than previous visits, charged with the urgency of protecting something valuable from a determined external threat. The company that had begun as a strategic investment opportunity had become something more personal, a symbol of what could be achieved through careful management and collaborative effort. The emergency meeting revealed the scope of Hartwell's intelligence gathering and the sophistication of their employee recruitment strategy. The job offers were indeed based on detailed knowledge of each employee's career aspirations, compensation expectations, and dissatisfaction with current advancement opportunities at Sterling Industries. This level of targeting requires inside information, Patricia Williams concluded after reviewing the recruitment materials. Either someone within our organization is feeding data to Hartwell, or they've gained unauthorized access to our personnel and project management systems. What are our options for responding? I asked. Both defensively and in terms of potential legal action. Defensively, we need to audit our information security systems and restrict access to sensitive personnel data. Legally, we may have grounds for claims regarding corporate espionage and tortious interference with employee contracts. The investigation that followed revealed the true scope of Hartwell's campaign against Sterling Industries and the lengths they were prepared to go to force an acquisition. But it also revealed something unexpected about corporate loyalty and the value of authentic leadership in protecting against external threats. By the end of that Friday afternoon, I understood that the battle for Sterling Industries would require not just financial resources and legal strategies, but also the kind of personal commitment and collaborative effort that had transformed my family relationships over the past 3 months. The complete failure that Marcus had declared me to be was about to be tested in ways I hadn't anticipated, but with allies and insights I couldn't have imagined when this journey began. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room at Sterling Industries, watching Richard Blackwood sign the settlement agreement that would end Hartwell Corporation's aggressive pursuit of my company. The investigation had revealed not only corporate espionage but also attempted bribery of key employees and illegal access to our computer systems. Patricia Williams had built an airtight case that forced Hartwell to withdraw their acquisition efforts and pay substantial damages for their illegal activities. "Miss Chen," Blackwood said as he gathered his documents, his earlier arrogance replaced by resignation, "I underestimated both your resources and your determination to protect this company. You underestimated the value of authentic leadership and employee loyalty," I corrected. "Sterling Industries succeeded because we built something worth protecting, not because we had superior legal strategies." After Hartwell's representatives left, I found myself alone in the conference room that had witnessed so many pivotal moments over the past year. The view from the 18th floor encompassed the entire downtown district, including the Metropolitan Tower, where Summit Ventures had grown into one of the region's most respected investment firms. Morrison knocked and entered with the quarterly performance reports that had become a source of genuine pride for everyone associated with Sterling Industries. "Ms. Chen, I wanted you to see these numbers before the board meeting tomorrow. Sterling Industries just completed the most profitable quarter in company history." The financial results reflected not just successful project management and strategic decision-making, but also the intangible benefits of authentic workplace relationships and clear communication channels. Employee retention was at 96%, client satisfaction scores had increased for 6 consecutive quarters, and new business development was exceeding projections by substantial margins. "James, these results represent the contributions of everyone in the organization. I hope you'll make sure that recognition and profit sharing reflect the collaborative effort that made this success possible." "Already planned, Ms. Chen. And if I may say so, the leadership approach you've modeled here has transformed not just our financial performance, but our entire workplace culture." As I prepared to leave the office, I stopped by the project management department to check on Marcus, who had become one of Sterling's most valuable client relationship managers. His desk was organized with the meticulous attention to detail that characterized his work style, and the wall behind his computer displayed certificates of appreciation from clients who had specifically requested his continued involvement in their projects. "How did the settlement meeting go?" he asked, looking up from a proposal he was reviewing for a major retail development project. "Hartwell Corporation has agreed to cease all acquisition efforts and pay damages for their illegal activities. Sterling Industries will remain independent and continue operating under current management." "Thank God," he said with obvious relief. "I know you never seriously considered selling, but the uncertainty was affecting everyone's ability to focus on their work." "Marcus, I want you to know that your insights during the investigation were invaluable. Your observations about which employees might have access to the information Hartwell was using helped us identify the security breach much faster than we could have otherwise." "I'm glad I could help." "And Erika? Thank you for trusting me with sensitive information about the company's strategic situation. I know you didn't have to include me in those discussions." The evolution of our professional relationship reflected the broader transformation in our family dynamics over the past year. Marcus had found genuine satisfaction in work that utilized his actual strengths, while I had learned to value his contributions without trying to force him into roles that didn't suit his capabilities. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for our weekly family dinner, a tradition that had emerged from the improved communication patterns we had developed since the anniversary celebration that had changed everything. The conversations now were authentic and supportive, rather than competitive or performative, focused on understanding each other's actual experiences, rather than maintaining carefully constructed images. "How did the business situation resolve?" Dad asked as we sat down to Mom's famous pot roast and homemade bread. "Hartwell Corporation has withdrawn their acquisition efforts and agreed to substantial financial penalties for their illegal activities. Sterling Industries will continue operating independently with strong growth prospects for the foreseeable future." "I'm so proud of how you handled that challenge," Mom said, her voice carrying the genuine warmth that had replaced her earlier anxiety about my unconventional career path. "Building a company that employees and clients value enough to defend against external threats is a remarkable achievement." The conversation flowed easily between business updates, Marcus and Jessica's plans for a vacation to celebrate his promotion to Senior Client Relations Manager, and my parents' excitement about their upcoming cruise to Alaska. We had learned to appreciate each other's achievements without competition or comparison, to offer support without judgment or unsolicited advice. "Erika," Marcus said as we were clearing the dinner dishes, "I wanted to tell you that Jessica and I have been discussing starting a family. We feel financially stable enough now, and I think I've finally figured out what kind of father I want to be." "That's wonderful news, Marcus. You've both done such important work over the past year in building the kind of marriage and professional foundation that would support raising children. I couldn't have done it without your help in understanding my actual career potential and learning to find satisfaction in work that matches my capabilities rather than my ambitions." As I drove home through the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from the humiliated younger sister standing in my parents' dining room to the successful CEO who had protected her company against corporate predators while rebuilding authentic family relationships. The penthouse apartment that had once felt like a fortress against family misunderstanding now served as a comfortable home base for someone whose personal and professional lives were finally integrated. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same panoramic view of the city skyline, but the perspective felt entirely different now that I no longer needed to maintain walls between different aspects of my identity. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah congratulating me on the successful resolution of the Hartwell situation and suggesting we celebrate with dinner at our favorite restaurant. "Proud of you for building something worth fighting for," her message read, "both professionally and personally." I typed back quickly, "Thank you for being the friend who saw my potential even when my family couldn't. Dinner sounds perfect." Her friendship had been the constant throughout all the changes of the past year, the relationship that had remained authentic and supportive even when other connections required complete reconstruction. Having someone who had witnessed my growth and celebrated my achievements without reservation had provided stability during the most challenging periods of family reconciliation and business development. As I prepared for bed in my actual bedroom, rather than the tiny apartment bedroom my family had once imagined, I felt a deep sense of completion that had nothing to do with financial success or professional recognition. The complete failure that Marcus had declared me to be had indeed been transformed, but not into the vengeful triumph I might have envisioned. Instead, it had become something far more valuable, the foundation for building authentic relationships and sustainable achievements that reflected my actual values and capabilities. The systematic dismantling I had begun wasn't destruction for its own sake, but the careful removal of barriers that had prevented genuine understanding and mutual respect. That work had proven far more rewarding than any business achievement I had accomplished independently, creating possibilities for connection and collaboration that I hadn't imagined when this journey began. Standing at my bedroom window looking out over the city where I had built my business empire and rebuilt my family relationships, I whispered the same toast I had made a year earlier, but with an entirely different understanding of what new beginnings could mean. This time there were no tears, no bitterness, only the clear-eyed recognition that sometimes the end of one story is simply the necessary prelude to the beginning of something infinitely better. The brother who had called me a complete failure now worked for the company I had built, contributing his actual strengths to our shared success. The family who had dismissed my achievements now celebrated them with genuine pride and understanding. The business empire I had constructed in secret now operated transparently, creating value for employees, clients, and communities, rather than serving merely as a weapon against those who had underestimated me. Success, I had learned, wasn't about proving others wrong or achieving recognition for its own sake. It was about building something sustainable and meaningful that reflected your actual values and created opportunities for authentic connection with people who mattered to you. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.